What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Kenny Florian is a retired mixed martial artist and commentator who formerly competed in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Kenny's analytical skills are also showcased on Discovery's highly rated BattleBots series. In addition, he can be heard on the Anik and Florian weekly podcast, which covers the latest happenings in the MMA world. Kenny competed for the UFC championship 3 times and is considered one of the best fighters to compete for a championship. Kenny continues to be a student, a competitor in Ju-Jitsu, and teaches seminars around the world. Kenny, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to chat. Just actually recently, now I don't even have cable. I haven't had cable in like 10 or 12, maybe 15 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's longer than me. I don't have cable either, but yeah, that's a long time.
Since at least 2008 for sure. And that was last time, one of the few times I moved, and we cut the cord then for sure, and whatever. But yeah. I was in a hotel recently with my whole family, and we were flipping through the channels with cable, and we came across BattleBots. And I kind of thought that show would be really cool for my son. He's really into like sort of STEM and robots and engineering. And but then I was just kind of, I'm like, is that Kenny Florian? And I might have known this. But it then clicked there, and I told everyone, I'm like, guys, we're gonna watch this, and this guy's gonna be on the show. So we were watching BattleBots last week, and it was great. We saw a really cool matchup. Everyone was excited. There was one robot who had like sort of short reach and like chopping, and the other robot had like sort of longer reach and more of like a backhand swinging kind of maneuver. And so it was kind of interesting to see you in that situation, because you obviously are really well poised to comment on such activity.
Well, you know, I would probably beg to differ in the beginning. It was so foreign to me, but at the same time, you know, I think there's a lot of I guess truths in combat that spread beyond just jiu-jitsu or mixed martial arts, or, you know, and I think they spread itself amongst the different modalities of combat, you know, and I think I may have forgotten that a little bit, but as I started commentating and looking at these robots and the matchups and their approaches and all those things, I started to really tie together a lot of the common themes and approaches, which was fascinating for me. And I try to be the best student that I can. And I learned so much through that process. I think it's a really cool show for kids, especially who have that engineering bug. And I feel like a lot of them are kind of born, you know, they just kind of have a proclivity and a propensity for learning about engineering. So I think it's fascinating for those kids and families that are into that. And of course, you know, if you're a kid, you kind of loved smashing, you know, metal things into other metal things. So yeah. I was like that. So anyways, it's been a lot of fun.
It's really cool. And not only is there maybe the tiger versus the bear, the tiger versus the lion aspect of how these matchups will go, but I think there's also the performance matchup. So it's not just on paper, and it's not sort of computerized, or they have to actually perform. And then there's a live sort of there's obstacles sort of built into the rink, it seemed like, or
yes.
I'm not sure what you call it exactly, but with like sort of crunching mechanisms on the side, so they kind of avoid danger. So there's just the performance aspect of it. So I think there's always like 5 or 6 people on a team, but there's only like 1 or 2 like actually controlling
drivers.
The vehicles.
Yes.
So they have to perform live, and so I thought that was really interesting dynamic there as well.
100%. You know, yeah, they call it the battle box, and it is. It's intriguing because this season in particular that's being shown right now on Discovery, they did make some adjustments to the battle box. So again, you know, for all of combat, you have to adjust not only to the enemy, right, or your opponent, but to the environment, which is pretty fascinating. So making those adjustments and doing all that stuff is really cool. And I do feel like in all of combat, the truth will reveal itself, which is pretty cool. You know, you have one shot to do it. And, you know, you make mistakes and you hope that you evolve for the better.
Yeah. Very early on in my career, I did also work in reality television. So there's that little bit of connection there. But I'd like to go back to, I mean, you mentioned a lot of things there about like learning and jujitsu, and you're known as kind of a cerebral fighter. And something I just been kind of studying for this show, I just been thinking a lot about how, you know, it can be thought of as mixed martial arts, but it's like an mixed martial artist. And I've really been keen on the last part, artists, and sort of that aspect of it. And I guess you kind of talk a lot about, or think a lot about life being somewhere between art and science.
Yes.
And so I'd love to go back to like, where did you take up jujitsu? And even before that, I think you grew up playing soccer. Maybe how good of a soccer player were you? That kind of thing. And then when did you learn about fighting?
Okay. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer those questions. I played soccer basically since I could walk. I loved kicking a ball around. I was a little bit shy. I was a little bit timid as a kid, but for whatever reason, you know, physical activities kind of brought me outside of my shell a little bit. And I loved physical exercise, and kicking a ball and maneuvering around people with a ball was really fun for me. And I took to that and had a lot of fun doing it. So I played soccer all the way till my college years. When I was at Boston College, I played in the Big East Conference, and you know, played midfield, sometimes forward, and you know, had a blast doing that. And you know, it was actually in college that I came across jujitsu. I did martial arts as a kid. I loved it as a kid, but because I was on a bunch of different soccer teams and stuff, I eventually kind of had to say goodbye to it. I'm one of 6 kids, so my mom didn't have a whole lot of time to drive us everywhere. So I kind of had to pick and choose where I could go for time reasons. So, but I remember even at a very early age as a kid, probably 9-10 years old, doing karate and kung fu and stuff like that, that I felt a very special spiritual or almost religious connection to martial arts. I felt like the world kind of stopped, and it was a little bit different than soccer, I guess, because I didn't feel that spiritual connection for whatever reason. I loved soccer. I was obsessed with it, but martial arts kind of had a different connection for me. So I found myself reuniting with martial arts in college again. And yeah, I loved it straight away. I just became obsessed with it, like I do a lot of things. And I kind of just focus on that intensely. And I would write about it. I would journal about it. I would plan out systems of like how to get things to work and things like that. And yeah, it was just became this daily pursuit of trying to get better at this thing that was just so big. And I competed right away. I think after like a couple months of doing jiu-jitsu, I competed right away. That's kind of been the story of my career in a lot of ways. I jump into things probably way sooner than I should. And although I get embarrassed at times, I do learn much quicker that way. I like falling on my face, and I learn I learn very quickly, or I guess I just learn well from making dumb mistakes. That's also the story of my life. So yeah, I did jiu-jitsu right off the bat, competing, and did that for several years, and ultimately decided to take the next step and compete in mixed martial arts. I was very scared. I think I had a lot of anxiety as a kid, being in public places and being in loud places. And I was kind of frightened. I would say I was very frightened about the prospect of fighting another human being. Like I would have dreams about it, of not being effective at it. And, you know, it just really scared me. And I felt that eventually I had to kind of run towards that fear. I wanted to know that I could handle myself against another trained fighter. Like I knew that if I fought someone who didn't know anything and someone tried to just attack me or wanted to fight me, that I would probably be fine. But it's another thing to do that against another trained fighter or martial artist. So that's what I wanted to test. Ultimately, I wanted to kind of stress test my skills. And that ended up becoming a kind of lifelong pursuit, I guess you could say.
Yeah. How do you as a fighter prepare for the unknown?
Right. This is something that I try to really approach, and I think about intensely. I think that systems can always be hacked. Systems can always be figured out. So I think it's important for someone to think about things conceptually. If you have the concepts down and understand the fundamentals extremely well, then you could figure out the unknowns. You could figure out, the ideas of, okay, this is the general approach. This is what I need to do. And you can be creative in the moment, and be free. But if you're stuck to a system or stuck to any kind of dogma or very specific approach, you can get thrown off by something that you may not expect. So I think it's important for people to really understand concepts more than techniques in regards to probably most things, because it allows one to understand as opposed to memorize. And I think that's super important in regards to learning.
Right. You mentioned there in terms of concepts, maybe patterns. How do you sort of not stick to a pattern as a fighter? Keep it changing up. I think that's probably the worst thing maybe you could do as an opponent. And I kind of also, what about the notion of like kind of doing the opposite of what you want to do? Like if you get hurt, maybe you want to attack more instead of retreat at that point.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think anytime, I think what we're all seeking in everything that we do is freedom, right? The freedom to do what we want, the freedom to think, the freedom to go wherever we want, all those things. And I think that in order to do that, we need to be relaxed, composed. We need to understand, so we can problem solve in the moment. And I think that it's understanding concepts and understanding the mechanics of how things work that allows us to do that. And these are all tools. And I think we're always kind of seeking the tools that allows us for more options, for more versatility, for more freedom. And that can be a long process when it comes to martial arts, but I think we're seeking that in a variety of ways, right? Bitcoin, of course, looking for those tools that allows us for options, freedom, etc.
Right. One of, I think, your techniques or tools, if I may, is was sort of getting opponents to submit, maybe via chokehold or other methods. And I wonder about with anxiety, like if you're going to try to get someone to submit via chokehold, I mean, that could end up happening to you or
yes,
many other things. How do you sort of deal with, like, there's one, like I'm going to figure out my concepts and what I'm going to do in terms of figuring out the unknown, but maybe there is the known outcome of, like, if I make a mistake, something really bad can go my way. How do you deal with sort of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one must let go of that notion, and it's a difficult thing, and it was one that I kind of had to struggle through for a long time. Mistakes are going to happen. We're human, but being caught up in the fact that, oh geez, I might trip up here, I might do this, I might do that, keeps you locked into that frame of mind. And I think that it ultimately can be it can be deceiving, and it is one of those things that it gets you to actually make mistakes. So I think it's about really controlling what you can control, being in charge the best that you can, and understanding that there are certain things that you can't control. And I think, again, having that versatility to say, you know what, I don't have to take this person down, but that might be the best method for this fight. And if you can't, then having a plan B, C, D, E, F, and all that stuff. And for me, my approach was trying to submit, specifically with the rear naked choke, because of the asymmetric benefits of getting around to someone's back. I mean, anytime you can encircle someone or attack from behind, there is that element of surprise, but there's that element of having a force upon them that they don't have on you. So that leverage was something that I always try to seek out, because there's a lot of tough individuals out there. There's a lot of people that can take a tremendous amount of damage, physically. I mean, there's certain zombies out there. I mean, you hit them repeatedly and you can't knock them out. But one thing, when you're talking about the biology and human anatomy, if I'm able to cut off that blood supply to the brain, it doesn't matter how tough you are. It doesn't matter how much you want to continue. Your body just shuts down. So, and while you can do that with the knockout strike, it's not certain. It's not absolutely certain. And I definitely wasn't of the big and burly type who was, extremely powerful and explosive to be able to knock out my opponents like that. Not to say I couldn't, but I'm not built like that. So I had to find what worked best for me and my approach, I guess, in my body.
Do you think that got into your opponent's head, that could be a likely outcome of facing Florian, that you might lose your advantage or leverage somewhere and you could be knocked out?
I think so. I think over time it probably came a little bit more apparent. I wasn't a perfect grappler by any stretch of the imagination, especially back then. I feel like I'm much better now than I was back then. Body doesn't feel as good as it was back then, but I feel like that was something that was an advantage of mine. Also, it could be a disadvantage because anytime you set certain patterns, anytime you reveal certain strengths, people start going, aha, okay, don't get taken down by Florian, or don't give your back, or don't do this, or don't do that. So it gives them more options over time, or more game plans, I should say, over time, to plan to defeat me, I guess.
Maybe from like a really high level, like how would you describe the reverse chokehold, like in like maybe three sort of big steps? One is sort of getting into position, achieving the position. Two, applying the chokehold. And three, what are you also trying to do while you're applying the chokehold so that they don't get out of the chokehold or do something to you that could change the leverage?
Right. I'll try to address all of those things. So, our force, our body is kind of set up to be able to address what's in front of us. And anytime someone gets a hold of us from behind, just based on the fact that the frames, or I call them the frames, the limbs of our body work, we're not able to really effectively push anybody off of us or get them to maneuver off of our body. So getting behind someone is a huge advantage in a lot of different combative situations. There's the element of surprise, of course, but also, as far as leverage, the person that's behind you has significant amount of leverage. Now, what you want to do is try to mirror your body with theirs. You want to basically line up your shoulders with their shoulders. So now the bodies are essentially one. So you are now stuck and connected and aligned with that person, where now they can't shake you off. So lining your hips and shoulders with that of your opponent is critical. And then getting underneath their chin to affect the carotid arteries of the neck. And if you're able to squeeze the carotid arteries of the neck, which are the arteries that go from essentially like your torso up through your neck to your brain, if you're able to choke that off, literally, you stop the blood supply to the brain. And as a defense response, your body essentially goes to sleep. And I would equate it to stepping on a water hose. If you're stepping on a water hose, you'll notice that water stops flowing. And that's kind of the same idea. We want to be able to effect enough pressure where we stop that blood supply, that's pumping through your heart, that's going up to your brain. And that alerts the body that there's something very wrong, and a shutdown happens. So you basically go to sleep.
Right. What's the threshold for misapplying it and causing sort of like unintended harm? Right. As well as what is sort of how long should this take if it's going well, like that it's working and they're going to go out?
Sure. Great question. I think typically it's like 4 to 8 seconds when applied properly. That's usually all it takes to stop that blood flow to the brain. And if it's not perfect, if it's not lined up properly, then they're going to have that little bit of space where that carotid artery isn't completely shut off. So it really, it really should be called a strangle. It's not necessarily a choke. You can't necessarily choke me out just with one hand like you see in the movies or something like that, or some self-defense scenarios. It needs to be a proper pressure that is applied that's cutting off that blood supply on the neck, and carotid arteries are major arteries. So stopping those, you could really do some serious well, I wouldn't say harm necessarily. There are some instances of maybe certain people that maybe have been compromised, their bodies are already compromised, where they had an aneurysm, which is obviously something you want to avoid. But I would say it's infinitely more safe than hitting your opponent. I would say, so yeah.
I'm really fascinated by this idea of the unknown and the chance. And so, I think a lot about when I think about fighting, maybe just from the headlines and what's in the news and who's fighting. I kind of like who's undefeated, right. And I think there's this, and I wonder if there's this, maybe do professional fighters look at it differently in the sense of like, I know he lost once, but it was because he made this wrong decision at the wrong time against a lesser opponent who got lucky, and we don't hold it against them, kind of thing. And I'm also kind of curious about, within the same vein, sort of being compromised by either injury from fight to fight, or even within a fight, like maybe how to manage, not being at your best within the fight, but still having to continue.
Geez, those are really things that are tough to manage. I too find it fascinating when someone is able to remain undefeated, especially in a sport as complicated and difficult as mixed martial arts, where there's so many things that can go right and wrong. And as you mentioned, injuries that happen during the fight, injuries that happen ultimately before the fight. And there are a plethora of them, and a ton of things that can go wrong. And I honestly, I'm not sure I can remember many fights that I had where I wasn't injured. It's just a part of the sport. The sport is too, I guess, tough on you, where you have to be testing yourself almost every day. And through that process, your body takes a toll on your body. So there's the approach of fighters who have such great physical skills that those ultimately overwhelm their opponents, where they're just so powerful. Like a Francis Ngannou, I would say, who's the UFC heavyweight champion, who's also into Bitcoin, by the way, is he's so physically dominant that if he catches you once, he knocks you out. That's it. The fight's over. Right. He's so powerful. And there's other people that have, such great offensive skills, where they have so many different weapons. Let's say like, the United States military, for example, where they have so much firepower, where it's like, we can't, they have too many skills. They have too many weapons. They're just above us, and then there's people who have amazing defense, let's say like a Floyd Mayweather, for example, where, offensively, he's not going to dazzle you. Does he have certain things that he does that can wow you? Sure. He's very fast. There's no debating that. But what's most impressive about a Floyd Mayweather is that when I look over the course of his career, there's maybe like, I don't know, a handful of times where I was like, oh, Floyd got hurt. Now he's facing the best boxers in the world. He's done it, 50 times? And there's maybe 5 times in all of those minutes and hours and, tons of fights that I can say that maybe 5 times I've seen him hurt. Maybe that's phenomenal. That means he has a certain understanding of defense that other people, they just don't recognize. They don't understand. They don't know. And to me, defense is probably the most important thing that you can have. And I think it's the least understood thing. And I think that's because it leads to a level of invincibility. Superman is Superman, not because, he's very fast and, he can hit you with one punch and knock you out and kill you, or, he's got laser eyes and all that stuff. Superman is Superman because you can't kill him. Unless you have kryptonite, right? So Superman wouldn't be Superman if you could just go behind him and shoot him and he's dead. Like, that bullet's going to bounce off of Superman, so that's what I think is ultimately super unique about guys like a Floyd Mayweather, is that their defense is so dang good. You can't get to him. He approaches it from the standpoint of, you don't get to hurt me. And because of that, all I need are 4 strikes, 4 punches around, and I win that round. Period. I don't have to hit you 100 times. I just need to hit you 2 times because I know you're going to hit me 0 times. That's fascinating to me. So there's very different approaches for different fighters, and what makes this sport, I think, so intriguing to me. I get bored very easily, and with fighting, I've never really had that.
Yeah. I mean, did you grow up? We're about the same age. Did you grow up watching Tyson fights?
I did. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that was my favorite era. And I kind of lost interest in boxing after that. And it was kind of because of mixed martial arts. I didn't get into mixed martial arts, but it kind of it just made boxing irrelevant to me. And so in the early days of UFC, it was a little bit more, eye gouging and a little bit less regulated and codified the way it is now. So I wasn't turned on in the beginning but it was so exhilarating. I didn't become a fan like I was but I would go places where the parties were, people watching it, and Tyson, wasn't fighting that much anymore, and it wasn't that interesting. And you bring up Mayweather, and it's like, he's 50-0, but you brought up really interesting points there, but I never appreciated his style of boxing. It was frustrating to me. It seemed like one of those football teams that grind out the 13-10 wins, and they're not very exciting. And and then towards a certain part of it, I think when he fought Manny, I just felt like it was too late for them to even, and then there was.
I agree. No, I think that's a good, and sometimes in boxing you don't always get the fights that you want to see, or they happen too late, as you mentioned with the Manny Floyd fight, where it's like that fight should have happened 70 years before they fought, when they were both in their primes. I think that's a part of it too, especially with a lot of the fighters, where it's like, they're not going to fight you when you're strong. They're going to wait for that. Floyd specifically chose a Manny Pacquiao that was past his prime.
I agree. That's why I don't give him. He chose that specifically. Yeah, I really feel.
And I think with MMA, you get a lot of those fights that you want to see straight away. You want to see a certain fight, it's going to happen. It's rare that it doesn't happen. So, I think that's kind of the unique difference between boxing and MMA, is that with boxing, a ton of negotiations happen and guys are really careful to not affect their record. Where MMA, everyone's like, I want to fight whoever's the best, and that's it. So I think there's more of a willingness to fight anyone at any time, I think.
Well, how would you describe this era of MMA? Is there a dominant usually it's in the heavyweight, I would think, division, or whatever divisions the most gets to bring audience. Is there a dominant player right now? Is there going to be, you think, is the sport very fractured, decentralized in terms of how competitive it now? Is there an opportunity for someone to really rise above everyone else?
Yeah, it's tough. Certainly, there's Conor McGregor, right? But does he have the same dominance that he used to have? No. And I think, is he the biggest star? Does he have the biggest star power? Absolutely. I still think people want to see him fight. He's still, a guy that brings in a lot of pay-per-view buys. There's other guys that are emerging. Jorge Masvidal, who's coming on the scene now, is starting. Is one of those guys that definitely brings in a lot of eyeballs. But sometimes the guys that bring in the most amount of views aren't necessarily the best fighters in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think it comes down kind of to what you were saying before, where it's like, who are the guys that are going to bring the most action? Who are the guys that are going to bring that element of, oh shit, I can't believe that just happened. So, it's being undefeated doesn't necessarily always bring the most eyeballs. And I think finding that balance as a professional athlete and right as a business, right, is interesting, because not only are you a professional fighter, you're also a business. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, why Ju-Jitsu? What made you really kind of gravitate? I know you've studied other ones,
Yes.
Why jujitsu? What sets it apart, and what made it so influential in the early days of MMA?
You know, I think with anything that we're doing, we try to optimize our ability to be effective. We try to optimize our time. We're trying to optimize how much energy I put into something and what I get in return. And jiu-jitsu, I feel, is one of the ultimate arts in regards to efficiency. I don't have to be the biggest, strongest guy. I don't have to be the fastest guy. I maybe don't even need to be the smartest guy. I just need to be the most efficient guy. In fighting, in grappling, in whatever it is that we're doing, we're trying to accumulate resources. And in grappling, the resource is space, and the resource is the floor. The people who can dominate the space aspect of it, who can accumulate the most amount of space, who can get the space that they want, and who can use the floor the best, wins. And in that process, you're looking to weaken your opponent, and you're looking to weaken your opponent with the position of your body. And I do that through physics. How do I control the levers of the body? How do I utilize gravity and my weight to do the work for me? I'm going to let you carry my weight. I'm not going to carry your weight. I'm going to let you do all the work while I move into the space that I want. I achieve those positions that I want. I wear you down, and I wait for a mistake. And I put a pressure on you until you eventually succumb to something. I take away your options piece by piece, and then I get you. I get you to make, it's my attempt to create as many dilemmas as possible. And dilemmas are way more complex than problems. Problems can be solved. Dilemmas, it's like bad or very bad. So I try to create as many of those situations as possible. And that's kind of the game of, that's kind of the fight game and the grappling game and the wrestling game, no matter what the modality is, whether it's jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, they're all the same thing. The physics are the same for all of those things. So it's why I find it very intriguing. It very much is a game of kinetic chess.
Yeah. How often in the professional realm did you fight other jiu-jitsu artists versus non-jiu-jitsu artists? And was it easier or harder going against a fellow jiu-jitsu artist?
Right. Yeah, I'd say that, you know, everybody knows something, right? Some stronger than others, some better than others. I guess I faced, you know, probably a handful of very good grapplers, you know, other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts and qualified grapplers and things like that. Some didn't really have those strengths, but some did. The one time that I was submitted, I was finished once in my career, and that was by BJ Penn, who was a world champion Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, the guy that I looked up to for a long time coming up. And when he was in his prime, he was quite the handful. So he was able to get position on me, get to my back, and choke me out, where I had no other options but to essentially tap out. I actually went out for about a couple seconds, and I was like, oh, wait a sec, I can't get out of this. All right, I'm out. So that was something that really affected me in a good way, as far as, you know, what I had to do to establish my defensive capabilities and what I had to do to step up my training to get to that level. So yeah, I feel like all of those experiences, it's very easy for me to point and say, you know, I had a terrible training camp, which I did. Or, you know, I was tired, or this, or the referee, or the canvas, or the fans, or whatever it is, you know, personal life. But if you're looking, and if you're truly looking and paying attention, it really is on you at the end of the day, and say, like, you know what? I made a mistake, and I probably made several mistakes there. What do I need to do to get better? And what I like about combat in general, it does reveal a truth about you, and you have to be very honest with yourself, and go, all right, what do I need to do to get better? How can I evolve?
Right. Do you remember the key mistake whether it was, maybe the knee didn't come up fast enough, or you didn't move the left foot into the right position, and, your weight was in the wrong place. Do you remember sort of that moment where, and do you remember, was it sort of, if you remember that moment, do you kind of remember it in slow motion? We're like, oh, it's happening to me now. Like he's going to get the position he needs. And I screwed that up or something.
Totally. Oftentimes in tennis, the winning shot isn't necessarily the shot that did it, right? It's like there was maybe 3 shots before that put you out of position that led to that winning shot. The same could be said for fighting or for jiu-jitsu. I don't think I was very efficient in my willingness to try to take him down. I was expending a lot of energy. So by the time the 4th round came around, I was quite exhausted. And I remember trying to take him down. I was very tired. I was very fatigued. He ended up changing his level. I did not meet his level with my body. He got in around my legs, ripped me off the cage, took me down. That was kind of the beginning of it. So the first part was me being tired, me already being fatigued. The second part of it was him level changing, getting underneath my center of mass and taking me down. And then the other part of it was he's used this very well. And I didn't have a competent answer to it. He has this what's called a near side underhook, where he does a great job of connecting his torso to mine. And there's not a whole lot of ability for me to get on the inside and maneuver him outside of that position. And that kind of, again, was another position that led to my demise, where I had to kind of turn my back in an attempt to escape. And he took my back and choked me out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story. I find that, I think like you were saying in sort of combat, I mean, you're really going to find the truth and the results in these things. How did you, actually, I want to ask like a little bit more about jiu-jitsu, and how did maybe the jiu-jitsu from Brazil. Maybe you could give us a little bit about the evolution of jiu-jitsu and maybe the Gracie family.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's a long story, but jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of different ideas of where jiu-jitsu comes from. Did it originate in Japan? Did it originate in India way before that? But I think a lot of people would generally agree that martial arts kind of came from India, Asia, and it's thousands and thousands of years old. Now, combatives, like so many things, evolve over time, and different people have their takes on it, and hopefully look to make it better and more effective. There was a Japanese immigrant named Maeda, who moved to Brazil for a period of time. And during his travels, he had met this political family named the Gracie family. And I guess in exchange for their help while he was in their country, he helped train Carlos Gracie, one of the sons of that politician. And that was a real life-changing thing for Carlos Gracie. He became very effective at jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu has this effect where it gives you this idea that you have a certain magic or superpower, because, grappling with someone who doesn't know what they're doing, there's a tremendous advantage when you know how to manipulate their body and how to control them. And Carlos was, he started to teach. One of his younger sons, Elio Gracie, who was not very physically fit or physically capable, I think he suffered from vertigo and things, would watch him teach and train every day for a long time. And eventually, learned jiu-jitsu himself and made it what many people believe are a more efficient style for him, because he was very fragile and weak and all that stuff. Ultimately, he got to a level where he felt like he could fight other individuals, and used to test his jiu-jitsu against other people in bare knuckle free fights, basically. He became like this, well-known fighter. And the Gracie family is also known for having a lot of kids, and they had a lot of kids and taught them jiu-jitsu. And so they kind of, I don't want to say monopolized jiu-jitsu, but they created so many different jiu-jitsu prodigies and instructors and schools that the Gracie family became synonymous with Jiu-Jitsu, or what was known as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And they eventually spread their art all over the world. They, of course, became most well known for Royce Gracie being so effective during the early times of the UFC 1, 2, and 3, where that was more of a contest where they were trying to determine who's the best fighter. Is it a boxer? Is it a wrestler? Is it a jiu-jitsu guy? Is it a karate master? Is it a kung fu master? Is it a judo master? So they compiled a lot of these martial artists from all over the world who are willing to test themselves in a real fight with essentially no rules. I think the only rules were essentially eye gouging and hair pulling, I think, basically, and biting. You could not bite, you could not eye gouge, and I think that was it. I think you could hair pull. So everything else was cool. You were good to go. So we were really going to find out, not in theory who was the best, but who was the actual best in a real fight when it mattered. And they built this cage so no one could fall out of the ring. They had a bunch of people come out. I think it was like 8 to 16 fighters for each tournament. And you had to fight 3 or 4 fights in one night. So which was, again, the ultimate test of efficiency and effectiveness. Not only did you have to beat one man, you had to beat 3 or 4 in one night, which was insane. Bare knuckle. So you had to avoid injury, you had to avoid energy expenditure, you had to avoid, being cut, all these things. So, and this was before it was regulated. Once I saw Royce Gracie be so effective in that type of competition, I was like, I need to learn this. I'm like a small guy that kind of looks like Royce. Maybe I can learn how to do that. So that was my introduction to it. And an introduction to so many people from all over the world that was like, wow, here's this thing that no one knew anything about. Everyone thought a boxer or a karate guy was the most dangerous guy on earth. And there was this martial art the whole time that no one knew about that opened everybody's minds to what combat is about. It's not just hitting someone. You need to know what you're doing on the ground. And it revolutionized martial arts in so many ways. And the Gracie family was sought out by, militaries all over the world and police departments. And we realized we were missing this huge piece of the puzzle when it came to fighting. And it was right underneath our noses the whole time, and which I found really fascinating.
I feel like this Gracie family is a whole rabbit hole. They seem pretty badass and hardcore.
It is. Yeah,
when
there's
you
no
say
question about that.
Look, politics, I think of them, and maybe this is misnomer, but they're probably well-to-do.
Yeah.
And when I tend to think of well-to-do families, I'm like, they're not getting into bare knuckle fights, and going around the world to do that. I mean, it's just wild. Did you ever? How close were you to when you were fighting to the early days of UFC where there were less rules? Were you close to that? Were you fighting?
Really. Not really. I would say I fought more, with the modern mixed martial arts rules. So yeah.
And then did you ever go to Brazil to study jiu-jitsu? And
I did. I went to Brazil many times. My first time going to Brazil was in 1999. And at the time, up until probably I guess maybe 2010 or so, many of the best jiu-jitsu instructors in the world were in Brazil. They had the biggest names. They had all the tournaments there. They kind of had the corner on learning jiu-jitsu. And I went pretty early on at a time where not a lot of Americans were traveling to Brazil. So I went with my brother and we trained there for a long time and competed over there and learned a bunch, with so many things, right? It's an information game. Who can get the most information wins. And I felt like that was the place to do it. If I could go to the source, or if I can go to where, the best guys are, then perhaps I can get some of that to rub off on me. So yeah, that was a huge aspect or a huge part of the development of my martial arts skills. and what was a huge advantage as well.
Yeah. So you did find, I guess, like the really good teaching. I always wonder when people go on these meccas if they actually get to the source they're looking for.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I don't know if it necessarily was the best teaching, right? Because it's always evolving, but there's different types of teaching, right? I can learn a lot from someone by having them kick my ass. Like they could show me without even a word, right? And my Portuguese got much better. I became fluent in Portuguese, but in the early times, I spoke Spanish, but my Portuguese wasn't optimal. So the best way that I had to learn was really through feel. They did it to me, and I was like, interesting. Okay, how did that happen? How did that work? And sometimes, people and myself included aren't the best at communicating what's actually going on. And of course, everybody learns differently and takes in things differently. I did my best to try to learn from them and take what I could and implement it into my game and get an understanding for what happened.
Right. It's hard to ask this question, but did you have a huge accident or life event?
Yes,
in
I did. I certainly did. I was in Brazil. I believe it was in 2003. I was on a place called Pedra de Gavia, which was Gavia Rock, they called it. And it was a climb where a lot of different athletes would go to work out. It was like this continual climb up a mountain. And it was kind of like in the rainforest part of Rio, a beautiful place. And when you got to the very top, you could essentially see all of Rio de Janeiro. I didn't always go to the very top, but I would go up this long hike for a workout, and it was brutal, and you felt great after, and you'd kind of walk into a waterfall and, just feel renewed and then walk back down the mountain. Now, we had done that. And as we were descending down the mountain, I was with some buddies, and we kind of went off the path a little bit, and we're kind of looking around and seeing what's going on and seeing the different parts of the forest and stuff like that. It was a beautiful place. One of my buddies had slipped down the mountain, and, we picked him up and we kind of laughed about him, like, whoa, that was interesting. And we kept walking down. It was slippery. There was a lot of moss, and it was just wet, and we were all wet. And I slipped. And I was sliding down the mountain almost like I was on a slide. And my buddy had gone to grab my shirt. I had a tank top on. And as he went to grab me, he spun me around. So now instead of going feet first down the mountain, I was now going head first down the mountain. And he wasn't able to hold on to my shirt because of the momentum and weight of my body, and spun me around and couldn't hold on. And he let go. And I was sliding down the mountain head first. All of a sudden, I just felt nothing underneath me, and I was just falling. And this was like literally one of my dreams that I would have repeatedly as a kid, was falling. I was frightened of heights, which was interesting. As I was falling, I had your typical, life flash before my eyes. Everything seemed like it was in slow motion. I remember being saddened that I was going to, die in a mountain without seeing my family and all those things. And, it was just one of those crazy moments. I landed onto a rock that was on top of a ledge and knocked the wind out of me. I remember hearing my friends, they couldn't see where I had landed, and no, they probably thought I had died. And I remember one of them was crying. One of them thought I was dead and all that stuff. And eventually, once I was able to get my breath back, I started laughing, and I was like, I'm okay. And I kind of did an assessment of my body, and I was like, I'm okay. And as I looked behind me, there was like hundreds of feet down. And if I didn't land on that ledge, I would have probably most certainly died. It would have been bad anyway. Let's put it that way. And somehow, even in falling head first, even if I landed from that height and landed on my head, it would not have been good. I either would have died or been paralyzed, or something bad would have happened. And I don't know how, but I landed on my back. I actually kind of slapped out like I was slapping the mat on a break fall in Ju-Jitsu. I remember it being such an impact on me that I said, geez, I could have died. And maybe I did die in another dimension. I think about that a lot too. And I said, I'm not following the life that I want. I'm doing what others are telling me to do, or what others, are doing. I had just, this regular job. It wasn't a horrible job, but I was working at a translation agency, translation firm, translating financial documents and things like that. And I spoke Spanish and Portuguese and could read some of the Romance languages and things. So I would kind of be the final editor of the formatting process and all that stuff. And I worked with companies like Putnam Investments and T. Rowe Price and Fidelity and all that stuff. So I would read a lot of boring documents, over and over again. So it was that incident that said, you know what? I really want to do martial arts. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to do it because life is too short. If I died right there, I would have lived a life that, I don't know, it was not fulfilling to me. And I knew that I needed to do something because life is short. So 2 weeks after that, I told my bosses I was going to move to going to part-time. I was going to do martial arts full-time and work for them part-time. Until I was able to pay the bills. A lot of things changed in my life. I ended up getting divorced. I got married really early. I was like, I think 23 or something like that. So from there, and a lot of people told me, like my parents included, you're going to do martial arts? What? How are you going to make money? You went to Boston College, you graduated, you're supposed to go to law school. You had a decent job. Like what are you doing? So I, disappointed. I think a lot of people. My dad is a physician, so he was in school for many, many years. He was a thoracic and cardiovascular surgeon, so he didn't really agree with my decision. My mom certainly didn't agree with my decision, and I didn't know it was going to be as a fighter. Ultimately, it pushed me in that path, and I guess the rest is history. But sometimes I guess you need to literally get hit in the face or get hit in the head to realize, hey, I need to change things up. And you either, succumb to the world or you create your own path. And I knew that I needed to do that after that incident.
Yeah. I mean, those moments are beyond. I've had some personally, both on the, sort of, I took the wrong step there and that was a close one. Or I made a stupid decision and that was a close one. And I even look at something like 9/11 was sort of a huge inflection point in my life. And I made decisions sort of along you did. I'm kind of curious, maybe that evening walking away from that cliff. I mean, was it relief? Was it embarrassment? Was it both? What was that night like? Was it a lot of thinking about what you're going to do with your life and sort of every single thing, or was that more of a gradual process?
It was. I was kind of I was hoping or thinking about or dreaming about, hey, maybe I could do martial arts full time one day. But
did that mean teaching or fighting or both?
I had no idea. All I knew is that it's what moved me. I was passionate about that. And that incident is what pushed me to make that decision. Ultimately, I was too much of a pussy, really, to be honest. And I was so afraid of what people were going to think about me. Like I was too afraid about what my parents were going to say, or what my wife was going to say at the time, or what my family. I that's not what people did. Like people expected more of me and all this stuff, and I was living in someone else's shoes, and I was like, I can't do this. That's it. What if I died? I'm not happy. I want to be fulfilled. I want meaning in my life. I need to do what I love. And I didn't know what it would be. I thought it would be as a teacher, but martial arts, training full time is what kept me so fulfilled and motivated and passionate. And, it was teaching, it was practicing, it was competing, and it was evolving. I knew it was improving my life beyond any type of monetary reward that I could get at the time. And it led me into fighting, I guess, which I didn't expect would happen.
Yeah, I can't help but think a lot about, I get the thinking, what are they going to think about me? And I've been through those decisions. I made a big life decision after 9/11 too, something like that. But like, I'm so curious, what about yourself made you think, not made you think, but like, what was it about fighting that was like, I want to spend all my time fighting? Was it like the hopes and dreams maybe of being a professional fighter and living that lifestyle of, a match in Vegas and a match in Miami, and not because the Miami and Vegas part, but like, I want to be the life of a fighter? Was it like being a life of maybe like a mentor? Was it, like, what was it to find? Was it really about some sort of this truth that you're looking for in the arena?
Yeah, great question. I think it's the latter. I think it really was about truth. But
how'd you explain that to people who like maybe your parents don't get it, but maybe like there's one day you're gonna get remarried or you want to explain to this girl, like it's not, I don't just like punching people in the nose,
right? It was really finding out who I am and what I'm made of and what I'm capable of. It was about fulfilling my potential as an individual, as a human, as a martial artist, as a fighter. And when I ended up being on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and that was a show.
And now you're in reality TV, not just fighting.
Right, exactly. So that was like, I had a few fights before that. Dana White happened to be at one of my fights in Boston and told me about this new show he was doing. I didn't really want to do it. I was pissed off because I had lost a close split decision. And he was actually scouting out your opponent. Yeah. And that was,
that's like the dream.
Loss.
That's like the Rocky dream. They're not here to see me, but I impressed them.
Right. And he came back to my dressing room and told me about the show. And I was really upset that I had lost. And he's like, I thought you were going to get your ass kicked, kid, and blah, blah, blah. I thought you won the fight. That was amazing. Have your brother interview you and send us this tape. Our producers would love to see it. I think I sent in like a DVD of me teaching or something like that. And I got a call from them. And they told me, hey, listen, you're the least experienced person here. You're going to be competing probably 2 or 3 weight classes above your weight at 185 pounds, but we'd love to do it. Would you want to do it? And that, me being ignorant about mixed martial arts at the time, I only had a few fights. I was like, yeah, sure. I competed in jiu-jitsu, at no weight class, whatever. Yeah, sure. I was the smallest dude on the show. I was the least experienced guy. Somehow I made it to the finals of the show.
Did you have the best social IQ in this?
Maybe, and
maybe the most camera friendly.
Maybe, yeah. Some of those guys were, like that's all they did. Like those guys were proper fighters. They were big dudes and they were scary dudes, and they were all regional champions in their respective mixed martial arts organizations and things like that, where I was just kind of like just really dipping my toes into mixed martial arts. I really was just a jiu-jitsu guy. I didn't really know how to, I had like a month of striking training. So anyways, I was definitely overpowered by a lot of those guys in a lot of different aspects. Made it to the finals. And
that's everyone in the house.
Yeah, out of everybody in the house, I made it to the finals.
There's no different weight classes in this house.
Correct. So there was two weight classes. There was a 205-pound weight class and there was a 185-pound weight class. I had made it to the finals of the 185-pound weight class. The 205-pound weight class was the famous fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner that kind of really allowed the sport to take off to another level. But thank goodness for those guys. But I had gotten my ass kicked in that final against Diego Sanchez. He had a lot more experience than me, and he was just a better fighter than me, most likely. But what upset me about that was that I knew I could do so much better. That wasn't me out there. That pissed me off, that I was overwhelmed by the moment, that I didn't stay present, what kind of things, like, was it like family, friends, the moment. It was the biggest crowd I had ever fought in front of before. There was a huge contract on the line. all these things that really didn't matter. I put so much emphasis on that instead of the present moment. I didn't center myself. I didn't bring all of me that night. And that to me pissed me off, where I said, oh, so that's what nervousness really feels like. That's what I'm preparing for as a martial artist, is the present moment, is the ability to bring all of me when I need it most. And that really did not sit well with me. And I realized, okay, that's a weakness. How do I prepare myself for it? And sure, I needed to be better technically. I needed to be better physically, all of those things. But I was much better than what I showed. And that ticked me off. And not to take away from my opponent either, but I definitely didn't show up. And by the time I was like, Kenny, get into this fight, he was mounted on top of me and I was bleeding. I had blood in my eyes. I was a bloody mess. And by then it was just too late. The referee ripped Diego off of me and stopped the fight. So I went back. I was very upset. And I said, that's when I really said, I want to be a fighter. I want to dedicate my life to this. This is what I need to do. I need to rectify that situation. I need to do that until I know that I could truly bring all of me when I need it most, in a self-defense situation. So yeah, that's when I said, I need to be a professional, truly. And I am going to seek out the best methods that I can to become the best fighter that I possibly can. And it started with me kind of going down the rabbit hole of what's the psychology of a warrior? How do I stay composed? What's the approach daily that I can do to practice this mindset of being the best that I can? And I read a lot about war history and militaries and special operation forces, and those guys they have their lives on the line. That's a totally different level that I wanted to understand, because I said, if I can understand a little bit of that, I can understand myself better and what I need to do in a controlled situation. So it gave me so many different lessons, and there's so much beauty in truth, even if it hurts. Even if it hurts, even if it tells you that you are weak in certain areas, it means that you can strengthen those areas too. And we kind of forget about that. And sometimes our ego gets in the way and wants to keep us safe, but we must face those things and understand that there are better methods out there, and we must seek those out the best that we can.
Yeah. It was fascinating what you said. And I think a lot about, in terms of maybe like the fourth turning and modern men. And, so you've gone into the ring, you found out a lot of truth about yourself. You've competed, you've become a warrior. And I think a lot about maybe someone who's not professionally fighting, and maybe they want to, as I think about younger kids. I have a son, and you think, okay, I would like him to know how to fight so he doesn't have to fight.
Right. Totally.
Right. But I think there's a big difference between knowing how to fight so you don't have to fight, and being a professional known fighter, and maybe being put into awkward situations. And so I wonder, have people challenged you because you're Kenny Florian? What kind of restraint I guess you have to show there, and have people challenged you not knowing you're Kenny Florian?
Right.
And I just ask because, and being maybe a known celebrity or professional fighter, it's got to be a little bit different than the average Joe trying to, be able to protect himself from the unknown.
Yes. Yeah. So I've never had a situation where someone is like, I want to fight you because you're Kenny Florian. I've had, I guess in the gym, you will certainly be tested by other aspiring fighters because you are who you are, right? It's like, oh, Kenny fights in the UFC, or Kenny has done this or that. I'm going to test myself against him and see what he's got. Let's see what he's really about. So there was always that, which is fine and accepted. And okay, this guy is doing this. Let's see what happens. But I've never had the experience of like someone on the street being like, oh, that's Kenny Florian. Let me mess with him, see if I could, see what I could do against him. But I have had situations where people didn't know who I was and, they wanted to do something.
And is that a difference? Is that a bit of a different experience? As they don't know you're Kenny Florian, but you are Kenny fucking Florian. I mean,
yeah, I guess it's I'm certainly not an intimidating force or anything like that. I'm not a guy that someone would think like, oh yeah, that guy's definitely
that's why this fighter happened to you.
Yeah. So it happens where it's like people like in anything, right? It's like if I have a bigger stick, then I'm going to try to take advantage of you. And I think people have attempted to do that. If you're looking hard, I got a little bit of cauliflower on my right ear, but other than that, there's really nothing too revealing where you're like, oh man, I need to stay away from this guy. He looks very, very scary to me. I'm not that guy. So people have tried to take advantage. There was an incident where I was looking at a school way back in the day with my dad and a girlfriend at the time. And I got out of the car. I had parked my car kind of close to a driveway, and there was a party going on across the street. A very large man came across the driveway and said, "Hey, you're parking on my lawn." And I said, "Well, oh, sorry, I'm off your lawn, but I can definitely move my car." And he's like, "Yeah, move your car right now." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no problem." And he basically started goading me like, yeah, move your fucking car. That's what I said. Yeah, that's right. Like, move your fucking. And I had my hat on backwards. I had glasses on at the time, and I just looked like a dumb young kid that's harmless. And as I was getting back in the car, he like kicked the car door, and he was obviously intoxicated. And I like held it open with my hand, and he's like trying to kick it closed, and my leg and my hand are still like in the door. And I, for whatever reason, whatever happened, I like didn't feel any pain at that point. And I was just like, all right, this guy's gone too far. He was insulting me for like 2 minutes for no reason. He was disrespecting my dad for no reason. My dad, it was not saying a word. And he was, I guess, I don't know, trying to be a tough guy in front of his friends. And he was drunk. So I somehow opened the car door and found superhuman strength, opened the car door, got out. And my dad like kind of ran around the car and tried to stop us from doing anything. And he pushed my dad. And then once that happened, I was like, okay, we're going to fight. And he went to swing on me. I took him down, held him down. Yeah, I was just like, you don't want to do this. He went to get back up, try to swing on me again. And then I hit him and knocked him out. And yeah, so that was one instance. And that I felt like the other situation I was in, I felt like, that was kind of a situation that I was put in maybe to teach that person a lesson, who knows, a little bit of karmic justice, if you will. But and then, someone tried to swing a skateboard at my head one time, and I threw that person, and they got injured. Luckily, I nothing happened legally to me, but so you have to be careful with these things too, because people try to take advantage of it. And, any other situation that I've been in, I've found a way to avoid it, because you only lose in those situations, I find.
Yeah, it's tough to win in those situations. And you never know what the unknowns are and who's got friends and
exactly
who's on what
weapons
side.
and all that stuff. Yeah,
it's getting a little more chaotic. I'm kind of curious, when did you turn to Bitcoin? How did you find Bitcoin, and maybe just go from there a little bit?
Yeah, I had heard about Bitcoin, I think back in, I guess when it was $75. A buddy of mine, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, had told me about this thing called Bitcoin. He's like, it just went down to like $75, man. I think you need to get this. And, he probably gave me some poor explanation of what Bitcoin was. And I was like, okay, interesting. Okay. And I was in real estate at the time at a few places. I was living in Boston and Los Angeles. I was kind of going back and forth, and I was a little hesitant in putting money into something that I thought at the time, I was like, well, the government's not going to allow this. This is clearly going to go to zero. Like, there's no way this could. So, and I didn't even take the risk of putting in some, right. So I dragged my feet forever. I was like, let me put a few $1,000s into this thing. And I didn't do it. People telling me about Ethereum and, this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I think my initial foray into crypto was Ethereum. Ended up making some money in Ethereum, and eventually I was like, okay, like Bitcoin's got to be the thing. Like, that's the most expensive thing. Like, wait a second, why did I go with a cheaper option instead of just being like, Bitcoin's more revolutionary in my mind, and it's expensive for a reason. It's more expensive for a reason. So I ended up selling all of my Ethereum and going into Bitcoin, and that was in like 2017. So I started accumulating in 2017, and still, if I'm being honest, it was more for I want to make some money. This is interesting, but I really want to make money. And over time, like so many Bitcoiners, it starts bringing you into other territories, and it becomes more and more fascinating. And I find that those slow, cumulative, enriching experiences have always been the things that I've tried to pay attention to, and are usually the most powerful, like martial arts and things like that. So I just tried to learn as much as possible. And, certainly over the last 5 years, due to social media, the internet, YouTube, all that stuff, there's been some great resources for learning about Bitcoin more and more. So I just became more and more knowledgeable about it. And I've been investing in Bitcoin since 2017. I accumulate every week. I've been buying since then. I'm fascinated by it. I'm highly optimistic about it, not only about Bitcoin itself, but about the future. And I think it's really one of those game-changing technologies that don't come around very often.
Yeah. I got a couple of questions there. We mentioned, you get into Bitcoin, especially early on, it makes sense. You want to make some money. You want to take the money you have, you can't store it in US dollars. You're looking at real estate, you're looking at stocks, right, whatever. And I get like that at some point, like, okay, maybe, not maybe, but it's more important maybe than real estate or these other things. But my question for you is more pointed at being a public person. So it's like, what made you at some point say like Bitcoin's a way, like a part of my persona, and I relate that into like the way fighting is a part of your persona, because maybe you didn't like tell people like I'm trying to buy a house every year, right, or I'm really trying to get this checking account and savings account with really good interest rate, like what made it more than just, or not what it made it more, but like what made you comfortable or brave, I think, to share it as a public person?
Yeah, I didn't talk about it for a long time. And I also, I'm a pretty private person as well. But I also understand that there's certain people that might follow me that or for whatever reason, influenced by what I do, what I say, follow what I say, follow what I do. And when you see something that is so powerful, when you see something that is so beneficial for so many, you realize you can have an impact in that message. So I guess that's really what led me to that path and to doing that. But I guess for me personally, what made it powerful was some of the common themes that I saw in what martial arts is and how I view it. And I think that when I saw an ability to increase my freedom, when I saw that there were a lot of power plays that were not in our favor, when I saw that there were a lot of inefficiencies with the current system, I used to have 2 gyms. I now have 1 martial arts gym in Boston, in Brookline, Massachusetts, Florian Martial Arts Center. And we would buy, kimonos from Pakistan and other parts of the world. We have a bunch of equipment that we would buy, and wiring money back and forth and being charged and waiting for that whole process and doing that whole thing. It was like, it was always a headache getting that done. It was just a very slow and costly process. So from that standpoint, it was like, well, this is better. And yeah, so it's just like a bunch of things around my life that were kind of like pointing like, hey, this is powerful. This is something that's game changing. And this is something that is truly yours. And I think that's what stands out again, more than anything else. It's really one of the few things that you can truly own without anybody having leverage over you or some kind of advantage or yeah. So all those things really was very interesting in it. And I think a lot like jujitsu in the early days or mixed martial arts in the early days, I felt like there was this thing that I felt I knew that other people weren't onto yet. Mm-hmm. And I can't quite, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew it was something, and I knew it was early, and I knew I was involved with something special. And Bitcoin kind of gave me that same feeling that I had with jujitsu. And it's almost something that you can't quite put into words, but it's a feeling. And it made me feel good. And it made me feel like there was something world changing here, not only within me, but outside of myself as well.
Yeah, I definitely can relate. I think of it as like the best way in terms of this conversation is like fiat was on my back, perfectly lined up.
Yes.
And Bitcoin, not being non-debasable, which was the sort of the problem I was looking for in my world, is I can get out of this reverse chokehold move and just throw you off in some way. It's like reverse leverage or a deflection of their weight. With that.
I think that's a great analogy. I think that's very true. And I think, and I've talked about this before, but I think that only seeing the option of fiat and making money in that world, I feel like it adds to a certain amount of anxiety. Like you're constantly caught in this rat race, and you're taught to consume and purchase things and you're wondering why you're doing all this stuff and you're consistently not being happy no matter how much stuff you have. And Bitcoin was one of the first things where I kind of was able to breathe better and not get caught up in that game. And I was able to store, my energy, my hard work, my hours of suffering on the mat and in competition, and put that away for either the next generation, my kids, or maybe my kids' kids, and more importantly, just preserving that for the future. And as we found out, the future is hard to see sometimes. It's hard to predict, and it can be very chaotic. I think that's a huge lesson over the last few years. Things are crazy, and there's a lot of powers out there that are, I don't know. I think trying to accumulate more power. Right? There's a lot of different forces out there, whether it's Russia trying to take Ukraine or Canada doing what they're doing or whatever it is. I feel like a lot of these things that are happening globally, politically, have been the best marketing tools for Bitcoin, and it's waking up a lot of people, and in many ways, it has been the ultimate insurance for me and many others of going, this is what can happen. And this is what has been happening. This is not what can happen. It's not like a thing that like, this might happen. It's never happened before in history. It's like, no, this is what's been going on. This is what the people who have monopolies on violence, the people who have monopoly on power, the people who are more powerful than you will continue to use that leverage over you. And your money really isn't your money. And if I can shut down your money or control your money, what can you do?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin takes that away from them, which is pretty amazing. And when you think about it, you're like, how has that never been the case? Wait a sec, our money isn't our money, our property isn't really our property. That, so it's I think a lot of these things that are happening, as brutal as they are, as horrible as they are, I think there's beautiful lessons in that, just like there was beautiful lessons in fighting. You may not want to lose. You may not want to get hit, but there are lessons there. And I feel like life doesn't always give you what you want, but it does give you what you need.
Yeah. I think in terms of like time allocation, I've seen a long struggle in my own life. It's like, well, do I prepare to be the warrior, hopefully in the garden? Or do I prepare to be sort of the monetary justice warrior and protect myself in non-physical ways?
Right.
And I do think at some point you age out of physically having to maybe defend yourself. If you're 65, 85 years old, like you're not expected to defend yourself in the same manner. I mean, it's not a fair fight. It's cool when a 65-year-old guy might beats up a 40-year-old bully or something. It's just not expected.
Right. Yes.
Has Bitcoin changed you in sort of the physical realm in your day to day? I understand that, as a tool, and we're talking a little bit more long term and sort of the greater cycles going on around us and sort of powers and different ways of being attacked, but more in the day to day. Has it changed you in that way in any way?
Oh, it certainly has. I think that it's given me more peace in my life. I feel like, I don't feel, with like, retirement plans or money that you're storing away, you don't feel like you're in this constant, for me anyway, like I felt like I was always in this constant battle to find the stocks or funds that were going to try to make me the most amount of money, and that were going to like, I need to keep up with what's going on with inflation, or I need to, find something that's going to maximize all this, the money that I've stored away, that I've worked hard for. I feel like with Bitcoin, it's taken a lot of that anxiety away. I don't feel the pressure of, oh my gosh, what I need to put my money now, and I need to shift things around, and I'm looking daily at the markets, and I need to do this, or I need to get this property. How can I keep, so it's taken that nervous energy away. I do have a great confidence in it. I'm lucky enough that I got in early when it wasn't, as expensive as it is now. And now, obviously, where some people would say, it obviously are high at 69,000 now, today at, 44,000, whatever it is now. But I still trust in the technology. I trust in that process. And I know long-term, it's going to be something that everyone wants. And, it's funny how people still don't understand that. When you're looking for a thing, you want to have as many options as possible. You don't want to have any single points of failure, or you don't want to have any points of failure anywhere, multiple points of failure, right? And when you look at the current situation with our money and our banks, and it's like, yeah, I get it. The current financial situation, like, you need to have those things, but do you need to have all of it? Do you need to have all your money in stocks? Do you need to have all your money in cash? You need to have all your money out. People are looking for options. And then when you're talking about where you can take your money and what you can do with your money and how protected your money is, and when you weigh that against our current state and our current amount of options, Bitcoin's the clear winner, because of its decentralization, because of the protection of the network. And so I think it's only a matter of time. We're seeing it take place already, like geopolitically on that level. And when that happens, it's going to be a mad race to accumulate as much as possible. And for those that don't have it, it's going to be one of those, hey man, sorry, like you took the information that was out there on the mainstream media and elsewhere, and you didn't do your research, you didn't do the homework, and now you're shit out of luck. Yeah, it's tough. A lot of people go by what they're watching on the mainstream channels, and it's like, if you're looking at, let's say, something like commercials, right? Commercials are always telling you about all this bad shit you're supposed to be eating. They're telling you about all these other things. So like, what makes the other stuff any different? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Good information, it's not everywhere. They're in very particular places, and you have to go searching for it. So anyways.
Yeah. I think it's great advice in terms of mind, body, spirit. One thing I got from this conversation that I think is reassuring, maybe not to you, but to me, is, that you still have some anxiety, and that being in the ring all that time, finding all that truth, it doesn't eliminate it for the person's spirit or soul or whatever it is. And even the warrior has their internal dilemmas and their concerns or whatever it is. And I think I don't think reassuring is the right word, but I think that's sort of like, we're in this together kind of feeling, in that regard.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to getting those tools to make you feel better about those things, right? It's like, that sense of fear, or that sense of uncertainty, those can be maybe not completely eliminated. In some cases it can, but all of those things are alleviated anyways with tools, having the proper tools and having the proper information to go, you know what, I can deal with the chaos. I have the tools, I have the information, I have the knowledge, and I know how to use it.
Right. And I think in that regard, Bitcoin is sort of like, I think the greatest tool in terms of dealing with volatility. I think of it as I try not to focus on the exchange rate value of the US dollar, but I think it's just a reflection of the volatility in the world, because in a lot of ways, the dollar is designed to not reflect any volatility in a false way. And my final question to you, what is the poster behind you? And why did you choose
Yes,
that?
so this was a gift from a friend of mine. That is me doing a rear naked choke to Clay Guida, who's been one of the true hard-nosed competitors in the UFC for many years. He's still competing at a high level, but I think that was in 2009 in Memphis, Tennessee. That was after I had lost. I was coming off of a loss, so I had to kind of come back from some adversity there. And Clay had been one of the toughest guys out there. So that's a picture of me getting the win against Clay Guida.
I've been glancing at it the whole time. It looked like a Rocky poster to me at first.
That's funny.
And I'm like, well, Rocky looks like he's losing there. So I'm like, I don't think it's Rocky. And,
right.
But I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I'm definitely going to check you out on BattleBots.
Right on.
Watch that with my son. But can you let people know where they could find you? And
Sure.
I'll definitely leave it to you for any parting words.
Thanks so much. They can find me at kennyflorianmartialarts.com. For those that are interested in jiu-jitsu or learning martial arts, I do have an instructional that can be downloaded on that website, kennyflorianmartialarts.com. And you can find me on social media at Kenny Florian. And to go back to the instructional, if you want 15% off, KF15. If you're interested in that code, that will get you percentage off the instructional if you're into jiu-jitsu. And you can find me on social media at Kenny Florian. If you're into MMA, you can listen to our podcast, the Anakin Florian podcast. I also do commentary for the PFL, the Professional Fighters League, on Fubo TV and on ESPN. And of course on BattleBots on Discovery Channel. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for this conversation.
Yeah,
it's
man.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, shout out to Brookline and Boston.
Yes, sir.
Is Good Will Hunting one of your favorite movies like mine? We're gonna
It
go
actually is. I used to
Smart Kids after this.
My running route used to be right around MIT when I lived in the Boston area. So yes, I would see that all the time, and it's one of my favorite movies for sure.
It's a great movie, man. Thank you so much. It's been so dope.
My pleasure.